Autumn 1775. King George III has decided to punish his rebellious colonies in America. While some British subjects sympathize with the Americans, a growing number see them as the king does. Dangerous and ill-designing men who forget the loyalty they owe to the power that has protected them. The king and his advisors study maps and military reports, while trying to raise a force of 18,000 German auxiliaries to strengthen their army in America. When these rebels have felt a hard blow, they will give in, the king tells his ministers. Across Britain and Ireland, ships are taken for service. 20,000 soldiers gather at Portsmouth, Cork, and other ports. The largest expeditionary force ever seen in British history will soon set sail. In Philadelphia, the Second Continental Congress knows that the British will strike soon. General Washington commands the main Patriot Army, which surrounds the British in Boston. Patriot forces control much of the 13 colonies with the help of local committees of correspondence, inspection, and safety. But in other parts of North America, the British remain in control. Their colonies in the West Indies depend on the British military to protect them from rival empires and slave rebellions. They will not risk rebellion. Florida's population is small and spread out, more worried about the threat of a Spanish invasion than British tyranny. Native American tribes keep a careful neutrality, although most secretly support the British, who seem the more useful ally. But American patriots hope that Canada might still join their cause. The province of Quebec has only been ruled by the British since 1763. Most of its European population is French and Catholic. They do not love the British, but the recent Quebec Act has restored their rights and privileges and has made many accept British rule. When messages arrive from Congress asking the Canadians to join the rebellion, they are ignored. Right now, there are just 800 British Redcoats in Canada. But Congress knows the British will likely send reinforcements and use Canada as a base to invade the 13 colonies. So Congress decides to strike first, in its own words, to free the oppressed inhabitants of Canada. The main attack will be made by the 2,000-strong Northern Army gathered around Ticonderoga, a disorganized force that barely deserves the name, but led by a talented Irish officer, General Richard Montgomery. In September 1775, he lays siege to Fort St. Jean, which guards the road to Canada, and with the heavy guns captured at Fort Ticonderoga, bombards it until it surrenders. In 6 weeks, the road to Canada is open, but desertion and sickness have already reduced the Northern Army's strength by half. As the army marches toward Quebec, a second force rushes to join them. Colonel Benedict Arnold, an energetic young officer from Connecticut, has convinced Washington to give him 2,000 men to support Montgomery. His route is dangerous, through a wilderness of thick forests, rivers, and swamps. Our march has been filled with an amazing amount of fatigue. I have been greatly mistaken. Our route is longer and has been filled with 1,000 difficulties I never expected. Many of Arnold's men give up and turn back. But in early December, he arrives outside Quebec and joins Montgomery. Their combined force is just 1,200 men. Quebec stands on a high cliff over the St. Lawrence River. It is the most strongly fortified city in North America, with 20-foot walls and 114 cannons. The very capable British governor, Guy Carleton, has prepared for a siege, recruiting hundreds of militia and stockpiling ammunition and supplies. The Americans are under pressure. It is midwinter, and just like in Boston, they face the problem of hundreds of troops going home in a few days when their enlistments end. So Arnold and Montgomery decide to risk an immediate attack. In the early hours of 31st December, Under cover of a blizzard, the Americans attack. But it is a disaster. They are met by organized, determined British resistance. General Montgomery is killed, and his men are scattered. Colonel Arnold is badly wounded, while hundreds of his men are surrounded and captured. The remains of the Northern Army, about 600 men, are cut off, freezing, suffering from smallpox, and hundreds of miles from friendly territory. For now, Arnold stubbornly holds his position outside Quebec. But it is clear he will not last long without reinforcements. That winter, Henry Knox, a 25-year-old bookseller from Boston, now a colonel in the Patriot Army, leads a remarkable supply mission. The movement of 59 heavy guns, some weighing more than 2 tons, across 300 miles of snow, mountains, and frozen rivers, using sleds, oxen, and horses. These are the guns of Fort Ticonderoga, which Knox has promised General Washington he will deliver for his siege of Boston, where they may well change the course of the fight. Knox arrives on 27th January 1776, with all 59 guns not far behind. A joyful Washington promotes Knox to commander of the artillery. Washington's first instinct is to use the guns to support a direct attack on Boston across the frozen Charles River. But his war council convinces him to choose a more careful plan: to fortify Dorchester Heights, from where the guns can threaten the British fleet at anchor. Without the fleet to guarantee supplies, the British Army will have to leave. Tons of timber, stone, and hay are quietly gathered at Roxbury, while the Americans begin a nightly bombardment of Boston to hide their preparations. The British answer with twice the firepower. On the third night, Patriot forces use the cover of the bombardment to quietly pull 20 guns onto Dorchester Heights. By dawn the next day, they have fortified the position and placed 6,000 troops there. The British are shocked. They open fire with a massive cannon attack, but it causes little damage. The British prepare an assault, but snow and hurricane strength winds forced General Howe to cancel it. With his men close to starvation and weakened by sickness, Howe decides he must evacuate the city. In exchange for a peaceful departure, the British agree not to destroy Boston. On 20th of March, the British blow up their supply base at Castle William, then sail for Halifax to regroup and resupply. After more than 10 months, the siege is over. The British have been defeated, and news of Washington's victory spreads across the colonies, causing celebrations and joy. A Connecticut newspaper declares, "The joy of our friends in Boston on seeing the victorious and brave troops of their country enter the town almost on the heels of their cruel oppressors was impossible to describe." A British lieutenant remarks, "I hope the rebels will be soundly beaten. I would be willing to lose a leg and an arm to see them completely defeated and their whole country laid waste." Not all Americans celebrate the British defeat. Those who oppose the rebellion, now called Loyalists, make up about 1 in 5 of the population. Each has their own reasons, which are varied and often complex. Some are recent immigrants to America, with strong social and economic ties to Britain. Some are firmly loyal to king and country, including Anglicans, for whom George III is head of the Church of England. Others fear an American republic will lead only to chaos and mob rule, and they can point to many examples from history. Which is better, to be ruled by one tyrant 3,000 miles away, or by 3,000 tyrants not a mile away? Many fear the horrors of armed conflict. Our once happy land is sinking deeper into a ruthless war. Rivers of blood will be spilled, and thousands reduced to poverty and misery. Many might have chosen to stay out of the conflict, But local patriot committees of inspection and safety that have appeared across the colonies make that increasingly hard. In the absence of royal authority, they have taken on many duties of local government and watch possible enemies closely. By 1776, anyone suspected of Loyalist sympathies can be investigated by such a committee, or targeted by an angry patriot mob, and often forced from their home. That violent spirit among the patriots of harassing and oppressing the Loyalists has spread, and I have been forced a little more than a month ago to leave my parishes, my family and friends, and to flee into exile to escape violence and imprisonment, if not immediate death. Some Loyalists leave to form their own militia companies, which fight patriot fighters for years to come. The conflict will divide communities and families, turning neighbor against neighbor, father against son. The king and his ministers believe New England is the center of rebellion, and that especially in the South, most of the population remain loyal, bullied into silence by a minority of troublemakers. A British show of force, it is hoped, will lead thousands of these people to step forward and volunteer to serve in Loyalist units. In the Carolinas, British governors Josiah Martin and William Campbell have been calling for just such action, since they were forced from their homes by patriot mobs the previous summer. At last, in January 1776, they received news that Admiral Parker is on his way, with 50 ships and 3,000 soldiers. But it is a very small force for such a mission, hastily planned and poorly coordinated as well. On 27th of February, a Loyalist force in North Carolina marches to join Governor Martin on the coast. But at Moore's Creek Bridge, they are ambushed by a larger patriot force. Most of the Loyalists are new Scottish immigrants, and they launch the last known Highland charge with swords drawn. They are shot down, and more than 1,000 Loyalists are taken prisoner in the defeat that follows. Admiral Parker decides to attack the port of Charleston, defended by about 6,000 rebels. It is the richest city in North America, and the entry point for more than 100,000 enslaved Africans in the last century. Its capture will give the British control of a major port, and surely encourage more Loyalists to support the King's cause. But to take Charleston, the British must first capture the rebel fort on Sullivan's Island, guarding the harbor. Parker's attack is a failure. Naval fire has little effect against the fort's soft palmetto logs, while shore batteries drive away British transport ships and cause heavy damage to Royal Navy warships. The failure of Parker's expedition is a serious blow to British hopes in the southern colonies. The only other British force in the region is Lord Dunmore's group of sailors, leftover troops, and his Ethiopian regiment of former slaves. But they have been devastated by smallpox and typhus. The hopeless situation leads Dunmore to withdraw his forces and return to London, leaving the Loyalists of Virginia behind. By July 1776, from the Chesapeake to Charleston, there is not a single British soldier. April 1776. For the first time since it was formed, the Continental Army is on the move. The soldiers are cheered through every town. Morale is very high. Their destination is New York City, the largest harbor on the East Coast, where Washington expects the British to attack next. From Georgia to New England, there are now growing calls for complete separation from Britain. The desire for independence is fueled, in no small part, by a new pamphlet, Common Sense. Its author is the British radical Thomas Paine, now living in Philadelphia. In clear, persuasive English, he attacks the whole idea of monarchy, while praising the principle of self-government through elected representatives. One honest man is of more worth to society than all the crowned ruffians who ever lived. Oh, the cause of America is in great measure the cause of all mankind. The birthday of a new world is at hand. Loyalists like Nicholas Cresswell are not impressed. One of the worst things that was ever published to the world, full of false claims, lies, slander, and treason, whose principles are to destroy all kingly governments and create an independent republic. But patriots control the printing presses. An estimated 100,000 copies of Common Sense are printed and sold across the colonies. Among the wealthy and merchant classes, there have been calls for independence for many months. Now, Common Sense convinces thousands of ordinary people that it is the only answer. That June, in Philadelphia, Congress meets daily for heated debates about independence. Congress has decided the colonies must be united in their decision. Private deals and last-minute changes bring it down to the final moment. On 2nd of July, 1776, Congress votes in favor of independence. 2 days later, on 4th of July, it formally adopts a written Declaration of Independence, drafted by John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman, and Robert Livingston. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are given by their Creator certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Ironically, the Declaration is closely based on English examples, especially the Declaration of Right and Bill of Rights of 1689. Debate and revisions continue until the last moment, including removing a paragraph criticizing the slave trade in order to satisfy the southern colonies. In the end, all 56 delegates sign, promising our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Huge celebrations break out across what are now commonly called the 13 United States of America. There is a mock funeral for King George in Georgia. His portrait is burned in Delaware. Royal buildings are damaged in New Hampshire. In New York, a 15-foot statue of the king is pulled down. Its lead melted into 42,088 bullets for the war effort. The colonies are now independent states, unless the British Army can take them back for the crown. For more than a year, the rebels in America have acted almost without punishment. No longer. On 6 May 1776, General Burgoyne arrives in Quebec City from Britain with 7,000 reinforcements. Brigadier General Benedict Arnold has kept up a blockade for 5 months, but now, greatly outnumbered, he must retreat quickly. In June, General Sullivan takes command and orders a counterattack at Trois-Rivières. It is a disaster. The retreat continues, and Montreal falls to the British. Meanwhile, Washington prepares to defend New York with most of the Continental Army. For weeks, he has anxiously waited for the British to arrive. Then, on 29th of June, ships are seen on the horizon. With each passing hour, more and more appear 30, 70, more than 100 sails. You can hardly imagine the distress and anxiety. The city in chaos, the alarm guns firing, the troops rushing to their posts. My God, may I never feel such fear again. General Howe has arrived with 120 ships and 10,000 soldiers under his command. They have spent the last 3 months training and preparing in Halifax, eager to avenge their defeat at Boston. Soon, Howe will be joined by Admiral Parker's Southern Expedition and a huge fleet from England, commanded by his brother, Admiral Richard Howe. In total, 32,000 soldiers, 12,000 sailors, and 400 ships are gathering at New York, almost half the military strength of the British Empire. British troops land, without opposition on Staten Island, welcomed with cheers from the small loyal population, and learning of the Declaration of Independence 10 days later, General Howe gives his answer. 2 Royal Navy frigates sail up the Hudson and bombard Manhattan. without resistance. The British are back. To American patriots, King George III was a great villain, a blood-stained tyrant, and later in life, mental illness earned him the unfortunate nickname, the Mad King. But compared to other mad rulers in history, George III has some fierce competition. If you want to learn about some truly strange and brutal despots, Mad Kings is a new series you should not miss. Mad Kings explores the most insane and dangerous dictators, kings, and presidents for life of the modern era. Using stylish animations and amazing archive footage, it tells the shocking story of Saddam's eldest son, Uday Hussein, the violent, odd behavior of Idi Amin, who called himself the last king of Scotland, and the strict rule of Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceausescu. Together, they tortured international soccer players, fed enemies to crocodiles, and oppressed millions. Mad Kings follows their lives and tells every strange event,